3 minutes after 10 is the time. A very good morning to you. This is why Mystery Hour got invented, you know. Well, partly. Actually, no, it is pretty much the main reason. It was just a diversion that we introduced in order to protect ourselves from any risk of Ofcom offences with regard to elections. I mean, the list of things you can't say is, I mean, it's incredible. I actually have, this may come as a shock to you if you are a more recent admirer of my broadcasting expertise, I actually have an Ofcom judgment against me for making a mistake on election day. And now a little bit of me is worried that I've broken it again by even saying that out loud. But I'm confident that I haven't. I'll shut up now. That's why Mystery Hour exists anyway, so that we have at least 1 hour that is completely insulated from any real risk of news-based incursions. And it's fine, because there's lots of other stuff to talk about today. I wonder whether you're aware of things like this. Finance Minister and member of the Security Cabinet in Israel, Bezalel Smotrich, on Monday called for what has been described by one Haaretz journalist as translated, I think, annihilating Israel's enemies, saying there are no half measures. Rafah, Deir el-Balah, Nusrat, these are all Gazan cities, total annihilation. He added, you will blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven, which, as with many religious references, is probably not one that you have at your fingertips. But I think that the grandson of Esau, Amalek, or anyone who lived in their territories in Canaan, the idea is that these people, according to the Israeli minister, will be blotted out. The remembrance of them will be blotted out. I may need a little guidance on what that actually means in terms later. But, you know, if I was sitting here today telling you that a senior member of Hamas had called for the annihilation of Jerusalem and other Israeli cities, you would be rightly shocked and stunned. And here is the finance minister, a member of the Security Cabinet in Israel, Bezalel Smotrich, calling for the annihilation of Gazan cities. Now, speaking of Rafah, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made it clear that even if the current peace talks, even if the truce that is now on the table and being considered by his government were to pass, he will still enter the southern Gaza city. And the quote that I would use in this case is, with or without a deal. So... well, actually, I'll quote you another member of his government, essentially making it clear what they want. This is the Minister for Settlements, a far-right Israeli government minister by anybody's definition of those words, saying the deal is horrible and terrible. A government that throws everything in the trash in order to return 22 or 33 people has no right to exist. This is a ceasefire deal on the table that would see as many as 33 Israeli hostages released in exchange for a pause in the hostilities in Gaza. So I don't know that most people following this from Britain or even America are aware of what goes on within Benjamin Netanyahu's cabinet. That's or government. That's a settlement minister called Orit Struk, who is a member of the far-right Religious Zionism Party, speaking to Israel's Army Radio on Wednesday. So I now turn my attention to the events in America and the protests that are headline news in the UK. I've told you before that my antennae for news is poor. I sometimes find myself wondering, why is that headline news? Why are student protests in America leading the BBC News and featuring on LBC? And it's not a criticism, it's an admission that I'm bad at this and they're good. But I don't know that this has happened since Vietnam, has it? Where American student protests, you've got the Occupy movement, there was the Occupy Wall Street movement, but that wasn't confined to campuses, quite the opposite in fact, that had a much broader remit. Police being sent in to American universities to essentially break up encampments and break up protests. So hold that thought. Then coming up the Mall on my bicycle yesterday morning, I saw a small pro-Palestinian protest congregating by the traffic lights. Forgive me, I'm not 100% sure why, but there are a lot of sort of embassies and diplomatic missions in that part of London. And now I read that there are fears or hopes, depending on what your perspective on this is, that similar protests to the ones in America may start unfolding in the UK. And I think today's the day to contemplate the arrival of something that I told you was likely to happen if the direction of traffic continued. I think that Israel has lost the support of almost an entire generation of young people. And when you consider that this current episode began with the atrocity of October the 7th in Israel by Hamas, the reversal is absolutely extraordinary. The victims of a terror attack 7 months later are not just for this generation, but for others as well. Anybody who was unattached on October the 7th, anybody who was either confused, ambivalent, or objective on October the 7th, if you had said to them that 7 months later Israel would be in a pariah state, effectively, they would not have believed you. And it is the young people. And listen, it's hundreds. You don't know that they're representative of everybody on campus. And there have been clashes, violent clashes in cases, between some people protesting their support for Israel and some people protesting their opposition to it. Police in riot gear moving in, and these encampments have been there for weeks. And in the idealistic minds of these young people, their cause is incredibly simple. They want the killing in Gaza to stop. And in response, Benjamin Netanyahu and the members of his government that I've just quoted are adamant that it will not. So why is there even any lingering sense that these protests are illegitimate or somehow wrong? I wondered yesterday what the line would be that attempted to discredit or delegitimize these protests. And the line is, in the media today, the line is that they've been somehow infiltrated by outsiders and that this is not a proper representation of student feeling, which seems to me to be a bit of a push. And I think today's the day to ask why. I think that today is the day to ask why and how. So I may need to speak to younger people. Anti-apartheid protests probably would be a valid comparison in this space. I want you to explain to somebody, me, I suppose, how the pendulum has swung so violently from support and sympathy to condemnation and, I think it's fair to say, listening to some of these calls, contempt. 0345 6060973 is the number that you need. I challenge the narrative as well. But I think, and I speak to quite a lot of young people, although not very often about politics, to be honest with you, but I think that there is an incredible consensus among the sixth form and above in this country that Israel is embarked upon a course of cataclysmic wrongdoing. 10, 15 years from now, when we try to work out why the world is the way that it is, the events of the last 7 months are going to be writ so large in the minds and memories of these people. These are future leaders of America, remember. These are Ivy League colleges. These are prestigious seats of learning. And the consensus on campus seems to be that Israel has embarked upon a cataclysmic campaign of killing, which has not only left tens of thousands of completely innocent Palestinians dead. Of course, plenty of people in the Israeli government who reject the concept. They reject the concept of an innocent Palestinian, of an innocent Gazan. And the hemorrhaging of both support. You can't hemorrhage sympathy. You can't feel less sorry, less heartbroken by the events of October the 7th than you did 7 months ago. But the hemorrhaging of support and the dilution of sympathy subsequent to that day has absolutely stunned me. It's absolutely stunned me. And I wonder whether you, like me, worry that there is now a shift in the tectonic plates of international relations. I don't know what it's like to be in a country other than the UK and to a lesser extent America. But remember, those are the two countries widely perceived as the biggest allies of Israel internationally. Other countries seem to be a lot less full-blooded in their support for the government, and even the countries that are supportive and allied with Israel now calling for a complete change of direction, calling for a complete reversal of policy, and Benjamin Netanyahu appears determined to ignore it. So how could it have gone any differently? How could any objective observer not have felt this almost visceral sense of horror and disgust looking at what continues to unfold? It's coming up to 10:15. Let's get the phone lines open. The question is pretty straightforward, actually. And I stress that this is the question that I'm asking today. So this is the question I would like you to answer. What will the hemorrhaging of support among younger generations for Israel and active opposition now, the chants on this campus, the charts that I've heard on the news are essentially calling for a free Palestine. Whether or not that's a two-state solution or something even more worrying for those of us who recognize the unique status of Israel as a refuge for European Jews in particular. But the shift in public opinion, at the pinnacle of which I think sit these students, sit these future leaders, sit these young people, is actually terrifying. And I speak as an objective outsider. It's actually terrifying. But I think it's probably inevitable. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. And remember, the question that I'm asking is, has Israel hemorrhaged support now among young people? And perhaps you're a young person, or perhaps you're stunned by the way that your children have engaged in this issue. How has this happened? How can you go in the space of 7 months from having the sympathy and the support of the world to being essentially regarded as a pariah? And of course, the use of the word genocide pops up more and more. And on the BBC tonight, you will see allegations that Israeli security forces committed a war crime in the West Bank when an 8-year-old boy was shot dead. So what do you say to a student in California? You're trying to get them to stop protesting, and they turn around and say, well, what about the 8-year-old boy that was shot dead in the West Bank, which is, of course, the site of something recognised internationally as an illegal occupation? It's one of those days where you sort of wonder whether the students are speaking for rather more than the campuses upon which they sit. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. It's 16 minutes after 10. I suppose we need to ask, have I got this right? Am I right in thinking that antipathy towards Israel among young people is the highest it has ever been by a country mile? Let's start with that. Is it? You can tell me. You're a student. You're a college professor. You're a parent. Antipathy towards Israel is at the highest it has ever been among this generation, among the sort of sixth form and above. And could it really have gone any other way, given the continuing carnage and killing of innocent people in Gaza and the comments of people like the minister I quoted earlier, that essentially the annihilation of Rafah and Deir el-Balah and Nusrat is the only acceptable conclusion. 17 minutes after 10, 0345 6060 973. 20 minutes after 10 is the time. I've had a crash course on the Amalekites, and it makes the words of that far-right minister even more chilling when he calls for the annihilation of various Gazan cities. The Amalekites are a sort of nomadic tribe in the Hebrew Bible, seen as the arch rival of ancient Israel. And this fellow is a minister in Benjamin Netanyahu's government. But you probably also, listening to some of the students protesting in America, you probably also need a crash course in the foundation of modern Israel and the removal, essentially, of the people that were there before. I think that is part of this conversation. I think for young people whose introduction, this is the point actually, forgive me, I will take a call in 1 second, but I think this is important. For young people whose introduction to Middle Eastern politics and modern Israel in particular, their introduction to it began on October the 7th. I think they find it impossible actually to credit the removal of Palestinian people from their ancestral lands. I think, listening to the interviews, I could be wrong, and if you're closer to the action, tell me why I am. But that seems to me to be why this has extended so far beyond the events of the last 7 months. Let's find out. Jazz is in Uxbridge. Jazz, what would you like to say?
The question was, how did Israel lose support, right? Despite having essentially global support for months and months. What are you supposed to do when you watch indiscriminate killing? Like, I spoke to you a while ago. I'm a doctor, and one of the doctors, I think Al-Shifa Hospital, wrote, "Whoever stands until the end will tell the story of what we did here. Remember us." That's my colleague, as far as I'm concerned. Just trying to make the most of what they could do there. That hospital doesn't exist anymore. How can we say you can't bomb hospitals, you can't bomb schools, it's a violation of international law or human rights, and then they can still do it? And we have a generation of kids who have access to this information and incontrovertible video evidence in real time, all the time. You can't control that narrative.
Well, you could for a long time. Actually.
You could,
and indeed, in the early days of the attacks, you could control it. You could insist that the essential recovery, rescue of refugees justified the killing. You could insist that tracking down and eliminating Hamas operatives justified the killing, and they did. For the, I don't know when it. I mean, that was the question we asked at the time. That might have been the last time we spoke. Actually, is that everybody honest and moral should have been doing what we were doing and saying, yeah, all right, whatever that just rationale is, it can't be infinite. You can't kill I remember saying, if you kill 2 million people, is that still going to be justified by trying to bring the hostages home? And so that broke at some point, Jazz, didn't it?
Yep, it did. And, even now, I think Netanyahu is saying, well, we're going to move ahead into Rafah with or without a hostage deal. Yep. So what is the intention here? We had siege tactics deployed. That's illegal. Like, you can't keep doing things that so clearly break human rights.
This is the point. So this is why the youth are so interesting, because I am 52 years old and I have tried to conduct conversations about the Middle East over the years without fear or favour. And as a consequence of that, you've got to have thick skin to do this job. You get accused of being a Jew-hating Hamas supporter, and you get accused of being a Zionist shill. Sometimes in the same 30-second space of my inbox. But if you've arrived at Middle Eastern politics in October the 7th, you felt revulsion at what happened in Israel that day, and you have had a slowly blooming incredulity at what Israel have done in response. I agree. Yeah.
And I think we are in all these peaceful protests across London in support of Palestine. There's always a Jewish bloc for Palestine. We are having
there is.
Survivors of people who were in Auschwitz, like the children of survivors of Auschwitz, saying, not in my name, not in my grandparents' name, you're abusing our history, or you're manipulating what happened back then to suit your own ends now. Why can't we have the hostages come home? Why are we interfering with humanitarian aid?
You've got senior members of the government saying that forget about the hostages. Well, I mean, literally saying forget about the hostages. We've got more killing to do. Thank you, and thank you for the work you do as a doctor. That I think is something of a penny drop moment. That's the point, isn't it, about coming to it cold on October the 7th. Your introduction, in a sense, to decades of turmoil and friction, and you watched the terrorist atrocity unfold, and you felt disgust and horror and enormous sympathy for the people of Israel, and now you've watched tens of thousands of completely innocent Palestinians be killed. And the more research you've done, the more likely you are to have come across a far-right Israeli government minister saying that get the line right, throw everything in the trash in order to return 22 or 33 people. What does he mean by throwing everything in the trash? The determination to kill more and more and more Palestinians. And that, I think, perhaps explains why the need to demonize the protests has become so acute in some quarters. The need to pretend that everybody on a march is pro-Hamas, or that everybody there is anti-Semitic or full of hate. The need almost, I think in some cases recently, to try to provoke violence against yourself in order to whip up more demonization and misrepresentation of the massive majority of peace protesters. Any barrel will have a rotten apple in it. Sophie's in queue. Sophie, what's going on here?
Hi, James.
Hello.
Hi. I think as a student, and for most students, we've started to realise that it goes way further than October the 7th. And I think that's why there's a huge shift from, as you said, being the victim to being what is now sort of being the force that we believe sort of are causing tremendous harm, right? And what's happened is, if you think about it, 10, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, access to social media, access to Google, it wasn't there, right? And what's happened is people are able to go on their phones or literally be in touch with Palestinian people that are currently in Gaza and talk to them, and you get factual information about what's going on there right now. And us students...
You can't be 100% confident that it's factual information.
No, you can't be 100%, right? But can you be 100% sure that what the media have been telling us for the past 30 years or 40 years has been, considering that, the newspapers have one narrative, have always had one narrative, and always
most
been
newspapers. Certainly post
right?
Murdoch's purchase of The Sun, but not all
Absolutely.
newspapers, and certainly not the BBC and foreign correspondents at Channel 4 News and places like that. But of course, that brings us back to the biggest elephant in the room, which is the fact that Israel won't let them into the Gaza Strip.
Exactly. That's another question.
So do you think your generation is more informed about this, genuinely informed? Hang on, I haven't finished the question.
Sorry.
More informed than your own parents?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely, yeah. I mean, look, if you look at just the statistics, right, we know that 40,000 Palestinians have been martyred since October 7th,
well,
right?
no, that's very emotive language, which you're perfectly entitled to say, but you can't say we know that 40,000 Palestinians have been martyred. You say 40,000 Palestinians have been killed. Martyrdom is a religious concept, and then there will be disputes over how many of them were Hamas operatives. So you can't claim the factual high ground, Sophie, and then start throwing around very emotive and
give me a number.
Go on.
You can give me a number, and then we can go on, because I was about to explain what my point is.
I'm objecting to the use of the word martyred.
Pick a number.
I'm not.
Oh, but I'm Muslim, and for me they are martyred.
Okay,
So
even the Hamas operatives.
No, but I'm talking about the civilians. I said the word civilians. So I'm talking about the civilians.
Okay, well, I don't want to get bogged down in semantics, but I mean, look, the figure of 40,000 is not currently accurate in the context of civilians. It probably will prove to be once the dust has settled and the rubble is sifted through. But let's just say tens of thousands for the avoidance of...
tens of thousands.
Carry on.
If we want to play on words, no problem. So let's just say tens of thousands of innocent civilians have been killed, right, since October the 7th. Now, if you just go simply onto Google and pop in the Israel and Palestinian war history, there's over a million civilians that have been killed since 1948. Now, not a lot of people are aware of this. So what is happening... Well,
not a lot of people were aware of this, but since October the 7th, you think your generation has been on a sort of crash course of self-education.
Exactly.
And when you see numbers like that, it doesn't really matter what the established media narrative is, because the traditional response, if I were covering the show, the traditional response would be to point out the rockets that are being fired out of Gaza and the threats under which Israeli people live, which we know must be horrible and came to the fore when the Iranian bombardment began not long ago. But your generation is just looking at the numbers, saying, well, that's a million people.
Our generation is looking at the numbers. Like our friends from university, some of them are from Israel. Yes. Some of them are Jewish. It's not about, and it's not a political kind of situation for us anymore. We're not looking at, this one-state solution situation. It's one humanity. There are children, little babies that are dying, and it seems like there's no stopping. There's no ceasefire. So for us, it is no Palestine or Israel. Right now, it's just a human cause, and that is the shift from.
I think you're right. I think you're right. I think that if you were to, and this, when I say at the beginning of this, I refuse to feel sadder about the death of a Palestinian child than I do about the death of an Israeli child or the death of a Muslim child versus a Jewish child. It felt controversial in the context of having been a journalist, for having done this job for 20 years. But for somebody who's 22 years old, for somebody who really only became aware of the broader history and the broader issues at the end of last year, it's an absolute no-brainer that you 100%. Feel equally horrified or equally sad about the killing of a child from either side of the barriers.
Sure. One last thing before I go, James.
Go on.
As I come home on the tube every day, and I get the Evening Standard, which is a free paper, just to kind of recap, what is our kind of what are our London public being taught or told about the current situation, right? And every time I open the paper, there's never any factual information. There's never any information on the Palestinian front. Every single thing in the newspaper, right, is about anti-Semitism is on the rise. There was and I just think there's
room for both.
Yeah, I mean, why are we not informing our elder generation who do read the papers about the truth? And I find it...
I've never heard it put that way around before, but I take your point. And that I'm kind of alluding to that when talking about how the student protests in America are leading news bulletins on this side of the Atlantic, but the comments about the Amalekites by an actual far-right member of Benjamin Netanyahu's own government go almost entirely unreported in countries that are allies of the government in which he sits. So I do. I mean, I guess we're all conditioned by the circumstances in which our opinions have been formed. But the people whose opinions have been formed over the last 7 or 8 months are, I think, going to be almost entirely in the place that Sophie's just described. And for those of us who understand and revere Israel's role as a place of refuge for people who've endured millennia of persecution, that's actually quite a chilling thought. 10:33 is the time. And Thomas Watts, how's your headlines? 10:36 is the time, and it's not just young people, of course. Jonathan Portes is an academic at King's College London, a professor of economics, and in my view, one of the most valuable voices in public discourse. And he has drawn attention to those comments by Bezalel Smotrich, the finance minister and member of Benjamin Netanyahu's security cabinet. And Jonathan has asked, does anyone believe anymore that there is a significant moral distinction between Israeli and Hamas government stroke leadership? And then adds, this is not rhetorical. Obviously, trolls and genocidal fascists on both sides do, but anyone who identifies as a liberal, a centrist, or a progressive. So listening to Sophie and wondering what it is about that younger generation, it is the absence of baggage. I think it's the absence of maybe even the absence of historical context. They look at the atrocity of October the 7th and feel repulsed, and then they look at the I think you could probably use some of the atrocity, the word atrocity, to describe some of what has happened in Gaza since, or they certainly would, even if you don't like that word. And they feel repulsion on a human level, regardless of religion, ethnicity, or geography. And that's why these comments are so terrifying, because you will blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven is a reference from the security minister in Benjamin Netanyahu's government to the idea, essentially, that you go back to the Bible, you go back to the Old Testament, you go back to the Hebrew Bible to find a justification for killing everybody in Gaza. The Amalekites, the descendants, if you like, of this arch enemy of ancient Israel. And that's in the middle of government. You know, we think we've got some headbangers in our cabinet, but that's not just some fringe backbencher. That's the security minister. 10:38 is the time. Mohammed is in Hornchurch. What would you like to say?
Hi, James. How are you doing?
I'm good, mate. What's on your mind?
But first of all, I'd like to say, fantastic show. I love your show. I always listen to it. I get stuck to it. Every time I don't ring you half the time because I lose my cool.
Top man.
With some of the people talking.
Fair enough. Don't we all? Well, I can't afford to. I don't lose my cool. But I used to. Carry on.
Right. My daughter's been going to university and now she's just started last year. She's finishing off in, I think, in July, August, she's doing her finals. She's becoming an architect. She goes to Westminster. October 7th happened. She's got Jewish friends. She's got Muslim friends, Catholic friends, everybody. You're all mixed. October 7th happened. Yeah. Obviously, she was very much, oh, Dad, you've seen this, what these guys, terrorists. And I'm Muslim, and I didn't want to say nothing to her. I just said, do your homework, because I knew about 69, what happened, and the Nakba and all that stuff. And I just said to her, look, I'm not going to influence you. You do what you need to know, first of all, and then come back to me. And she goes, you're talking this, you're talking that. I said, okay, no problems. Whatever I'm saying, great. And every time I used to say to her, keep your distance a little bit away from the Jewish community because of the past, she'd always say to me, oh, Dad, you don't know what you're talking about. And I'd just keep my mouth shut. I said, okay, go.
Hang on. What do you mean by that?
I said being religious-wise, Muslims and whatever, just to keep a little bit of distance, something like that. Just my...
What were you worried might happen?
I didn't. I wanted her to make her own mind up, which I've done.
But
I mean,
I don't know whether I can't let that pass because well, I can't, mate. That's telling your daughter to stay away from Jews.
No, I've never said that to her. I said she comes to her own opinion. And I'm glad
that's what it sounded like. But we don't need to get bogged down in it. So what opinion has she come to and how did she get there?
Now, because of watching what she's seen and she's done some homework and whatever, and she's come to a situation, she found out that Palestine was Palestine. It was all done because of the British and the American thing in World War II and whatever. And she said, well, it's not what it's supposed to be, is it, on the television? I said, no, it's not. You need to look at the whole thing. And then she sees the human rights, where you got the ICG basically saying that they're going to convict.
They haven't said that. They said that there is a plausible case that Palestinian people in Gaza's right to be protected from genocide. There is a plausible case that will become true. So we've got to be careful on the semantics. It's also true that the International Criminal Court is believed to be preparing arrest warrants for various members of the Israeli government and the Hamas leadership on the charges of war crimes. So there's a heck of a lot going on.
Then you've got the government and saying basically pressurizing this ICC, saying don't do this. And when she hears all this, she basically says, well, there seems to be one law for if Britain didn't like Russia and the ICC made Putin a war criminal instantly within 48 hours or so, Dad.
Yes.
Why is it that the ICC is going to do something to Netanyahu or some of the Israeli cabinets or whatever? Why is Britain, why is Europe, why especially America going up there and using its influence to
try to dilute the likelihood of these warrants being issued? And that, of course, is why Joe Biden is hemorrhaging support among precisely the students that we started our conversation talking about today. I'm going to circle back to that thing that you said. I know you don't want me to, but there's never going to be peace anywhere if Muslim dads tell their Muslim daughters to stay away from Jewish students, Mohammed.
No, I agree with you 100%. My personal point of view...
Make your mind up, because you told me that you did it.
No, I didn't. I said I kept my own opinion to myself. I wanted her to make her own decision, which is fair, which life it should be like. I think a lot of the whole thing basically happens is that the kids are growing up and they're learning. I'm telling you, they
are learning, and you have to hope that what they're learning is correct. But with my daughter, I would have pointed out to her that in the context of Ukraine, Vladimir Putin is very, very much the aggressor, and that I think is what our generation have wrestled with: is that Israeli has moved from victim to aggressor in the space of 7 months, which was perhaps inevitable, but it's the profundity of the shift. It's not just aggressor or self-defense was the rationale, wasn't it, for a very long time. That there is what an entire generation of young people seem to have arrived at. It is 10:43. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I hope you feel I was robust enough with Mohammed for suggesting that he advises his daughter to stay away from Jewish students. For the record, I think that's a really, really stupid and dangerous thing to say. But in the context of a radio phone-in, you always have to give people a bit of benefit of doubt in the moment. But in case there's any doubt about my thoughts, I think that's absolutely bonkers. Max is in Cambridge. Max, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Hello. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Welcome aboard.
So I'm I'm in University of Cambridge. I got very lucky. And the sentiment here is very much that Israel are in the wrong at the moment. Maybe not at the beginning, but they definitely are now.
Yes.
And there's been, yesterday, I think there was, I was woken to some Free Palestine marches down the centre of Cambridge. And I think a lot of students went there.
Right.
But then I just have to think that this is what we're doing in the UK, which is not as supportive of Israel as America is. And then if I knew I was American and paying tax money towards America, and then America's sending missiles to Israel to kill civilians, I would be just completely outraged. I'm already angry with the government, but if I was American, I'd just be outraged, and that's why I think
the embargo on arms sales is I do you know I think, how old are you, Max? Did you say at the beginning?
I'm 18.
See, I very easy to patronise young people, very easy to patronise students and tell you that you're too idealistic or you're too naive or you don't understand the issues. But what's emerged in the first 45 minutes of this conversation is perhaps that it's those of us that have been, if you like, conditioned by coverage over the last 20, 30 years that don't fully understand. To you, this is really straightforward. If Israel is embarked upon this course of killing, which may one day be adjudged to be genocide, although that day is an extremely long way off and that verdict a million miles away from certain. But even as it is embarked upon this carnage in Gaza, the idea of your government supplying arms for that process truly repulses you.
Yes, it does, and that's why I think we should be still protesting it and such. And then all the students, coming back to one of your questions, all the students here, I'm friends with people who are going to become politicians.
Yes, you are.
From Cambridge.
Yeah.
And these people in 10 years' time are going to grow up, run for parliament, run for local government, join the
be careful.
UN.
You can't say anything about elections today. You're all right.
Yeah.
You're on perfectly safe ground at the moment.
Okay, yeah, they're going to grow up, and then they're going to live. They're going to carry these beliefs that they get.
This is what worried me. This is what this is what I tried to articulate in my introduction. This is a generational shift in the tectonic plates of Western sympathy stroke attitudes towards Middle Eastern politics.
Yes, and I always think about comparing this with the 9/11 attacks.
Yes.
And then the subsequent invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq.
Yes.
And how now we see the invasion of Afghanistan, the invasion of Iraq as morally unjust. I think most of the people can agree that it was a disaster and that far too many people were killed and so forth. And being the second biggest terrorist attack in the Western world, and then the subsequent invasion of Gaza, I think it's going to be seen like the invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq.
I'm going to put that up, actually. I'm going to ask people to respond directly to that comparison, that analogy, that the idea that the appallingness of the atrocity in both cases is absolutely unquestioned, but that a point was reached where the response made everything worse, not better. And the response came ultimately to overshadow the atrocity that prompted the response. I hadn't thought of it that way, to my embarrassment, Max, and yet more evidence of why you should never patronise 18-year-olds. What are you studying at Cambridge?
I'm studying maths.
Okay. So you're proper clever then.
Cheers.
It's 10:48. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. 10:51 is the time. I get a little surprised by the relatively well-mannered and measured nature of my inbox today. It normally gets pretty febrile when this issue is under discussion. But I'll pick up on something George asks. He says, why is it okay to prematurely accuse the Russians of genocide when no ruling has been made on that matter, but it's not okay to do the same for Israel? I don't know that who's accused Russia prematurely of genocide. I don't know that anybody has on that front. War crimes, perhaps, but that would be a different kettle of fish entirely. But on we go. 10:52 is the time. We're looking at young people, the generation that are now on the campuses in America. Reports today that these kind of protests might move here. And the sense that young people, generations that have arrived at Middle Eastern politics recently, are lost to the current Israeli administration forever, but possibly lost to the Israeli cause, to the Israeli nation. That's the point that Max, an 18-year-old maths undergraduate at Cambridge University, made so powerfully about his peer group, who will be the politicians of tomorrow, and they will have their opinions formed in the current crucible of conflict in Gaza, and they will still have those opinions in 10, 20, 30 years if and when they move into politics or they move into government. And the same will be true of other professions. The same will be true of my profession. The same will be true of academia. And that, I think, is not only very, very interesting, but also kind of scary. Particularly, there's two ways I was thinking the other day of looking at Israel. There's a million ways of looking at Israel, but if you're trying to understand it, someone wrote about the family history of people like Netanyahu and Smotrich, and I haven't checked whether this is true in all of the cases of the politicians coming out with the really gross stuff, but their families between 1922 and 1948, I read, were in mandatory Palestine. They weren't in Europe. So I wonder if there's two mindsets among Jewish Israelis. There is the refuge mindset. This is the place where we're safe. And then there is the pioneer mindset or the frontier mindset, which could be akin to early arrivals in America, where we are here to build frontiers. We're here to push frontiers. We're here to be pioneers. You couple that with religious extremism, you've got a security minister essentially trying to reheat grievances that go back to the Old Testament, literally back to the Old Testament. When you're an observer in the West, when you're a non-Jewish observer in the West, you have to guard against the danger of conflating the two positions. They're two incredibly different positions, aren't they? Israel is a place of refuge versus Israel is a place for pioneers. And it seems to me that the pioneers have had the political steering wheel now for almost as long as you can remember. And that's what this younger generation has arrived at. That's all they know. And they don't like it. Anne's in Inverness. Anne, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James. It's an honor to speak to you.
I've been listening to you for some time. It's a pleasure to talk to you. There's no honor here. Thank you.
Well, my observation is, as a Jewish American, though I live in the UK now, but I just returned after 4 months there, I'm quite concerned that the students protesting are going to be a difficult win for Biden at the elections, because a lot of the people that I know, older Jewish people, are certainly turning towards Trump and I think the radical right, thinking that that's a better protection for Israel. And then the young people who, as you said, don't have the same history of Israel may just simply stay home and not vote. The states that are having the biggest problems, California and New York, and even the bringing in the police, those are Democrat states. And if they see the Democrats as not listening to them, I think they may not vote for Trump, but may simply not vote. And if they don't vote, then the Democrats are in trouble. And if the Democrats are in trouble, we have right-wing governments in both the USA and in Israel. And that's
the benefit. And I mean, it's a mad alliance, isn't it? Sometimes with the radical right, particularly with the evangelical Christians who sort of want. I had to read this twice when I first came across it. They kind of want Jerusalem to have its historical status restored because they believe in a second coming, at which point God will separate people into heaven and hell, and they'll actually the people that are doing. In America, they think all the Jews are going to go to hell, but the people you're talking about think that these are their best friends at the moment for the short-term political landscape.
100%.
That's the maddest thing I've ever said on the radio, Anne, isn't it?
Oh, it's true. And I try to tell my Jewish friends just that. please look at the evangelical Christians. They are not your friends. They never will be. They never have been. And that is exactly right. They are some of the most pro-Zionists there. In fact, when Trump returned the capital to Jerusalem, or the embassy to Jerusalem, they were the ones yelling the loudest because they thought, finally, our Zionist passion for the second coming of and the destruction of Israel is coming into play. So they're right behind it.
Yeah, I mean, this is worrying enough in the short term, but we're talking about the long-term impact today from one side of the fence, but you're describing the other side of the fence, which is a sort of becoming increasingly allied to the movements that shut down all criticism of Israel ever. I mean, which is very well represented in right-wing media, from sort of Fox News down. Why has it happened? Clearly. Do you think? Why has this shift post October the 7th taken place with this generation in particular?
Well, I do think they get their information from different places. Yeah. And certainly if you're on TikTok, you're going to see a lot of much more pro-Palestinian views. That's certainly there. But I just think that it's a matter of what's fair, what's right. I mean, what they're asking for is divestment. They're just saying, we're paying $70,000 a year to go to these elite schools. We want you to divest in Israel. Yeah. We want to see where the money's going, where our money is going. I mean, there's the freedom of speech issues, but they're private universities, and so they're allowed to tell them what they can and can't say. But what they're asking for is not out of the question. It's what they asked for during South African apartheid.
And I wonder whether, at my age, it has felt like it was out of the question because it was just so normal. Of course you can't stop sending arms to Israel. Would be the American equivalent of somebody here thinking, well, of course it would be nice if we didn't send arms to Saudi Arabia, but of course we have to. If we don't do it, someone else will do it. Or think of all the jobs in the armament. I don't know. I'm thinking out loud. And with the help of people like Anne, it can be a very illustrative and illuminating process. Although, happily, I spoke too soon about the madness in my inbox. Here's one from Sue, who says, nice to see Jihadi Obrien supporting the moronic sheep in America blocking Jewish students from attending lessons. The anti-Semitism you promote is deplorable. Palestine is not and never has been a Palestinian ancestral home. Well, you have a great day, Sue. It is 3 minutes after 11 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where I think we'll do what we suggested we might do, and we'll take Max's point and run with it. Mystery Hour on the way at 12, of course. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. But I know what's going to happen now. I'm going to say that crikey, I hadn't really thought of it like that before, but that's a really, really good point. And you'll ring in and go, or you'll sit at home or at work or wherever you are, and you'll just go, flipping heck, James. Whatever next? The Pope is a Catholic, or the lavatorial habits of wood-based bears? What are you going to be taken aback by next? And I do remember people talking about October the 7th being Israel's 9/11, right? It may even have appeared in headlines. October the 7th is Israel's 9/11. It didn't occur to me then that the second act of 9/11 might also be on the horizon. And as Max suggested, the response to 9/11, whether in Afghanistan or in Iraq or anywhere else, has got a much bigger place in history, hasn't it, than the terrorist atrocity that launched it. The response, if you like, has dwarfed the origin. And 7 months after October the 7th, I think it's probably time to ask whether that's true. Because that is the best simple way of understanding what we've been talking about since 10 o'clock this morning. That is the very best simple account for a generational shift in support for, as opposed to sympathy with, the modern state of Israel. I'm not really going to do Idiot's Corner today, but I'm reading out comments from members of the Israeli government. Obviously, there are members of Hamas who say disgusting things as well. But I don't think, as a supporter of Israel, you should be calling upon me to treat them as equivalent or the same, because then you're saying Israel might as well be a proscribed terrorist group. The whole point about a country with which we are allies is that we not only expect them to abide by higher standards than countries which we consider to be either enemies or under the jackboot of a terrorist regime, on a completely different moral plane. So I understand why, listening to the first hour of the program today, you're desperately looking around for something to push back against. But the idea that a terrorist in the Israeli government or a far-right member of it saying something absolutely outrageous and genocidal, let's not beat about the bush, that is a genocidal comment that the security minister has made. It is calling for the memory of Amalek to be blotted out. That is unless those words mean things that I don't understand, that is a genocidal ambition being expressed by Bezalel Smotrich, the finance minister. I don't think it helps Israel's cause by saying, yeah, that's as bad as what Hamas say that is. That's the point that Jonathan Portes makes in a tweet this morning about there being no significant moral distinction between Israeli and Hamas leadership. And that's where the September the 11th analogy, I think, takes flight. Because you look back now on the Bush and Blair coalition in Iraq and you see it as something that was epically wrong, catastrophically, cataclysmically wrong. Please God, the death tolls involved in Gaza are never going to come close to the death tolls involved in Iraq or Afghanistan. But look at the ramifications. The Taliban are back in charge in Afghanistan. The failure to have a plan in place for dealing with Iraq after Saddam Hussein essentially spawned the genesis of ISIS. Civil war in Syria, the Middle East continuing to burn, and cleverer people than me will track back various events across that part of the world to the original invasion and the subsequent vacuum, the subsequent aftermath. And so, I mean, two things occur to me. The first is stop saying, or don't stop saying it, because it's important that people are aware of it. But if you think you're defending Israel when you point out that their hotheads sound as genocidal and as mad as Hamas's hotheads, but your hotheads are in the actual government, I don't think you're doing what you think you're doing. But I do appreciate how difficult this conversation must be for people who are on the refuge side of Israel's legacy and Israel's history. I wonder whether actually Joe Biden was a little bit further ahead of the action than we were, and he spotted this parallel a little earlier. This is him speaking in Tel Aviv on October the 18th, so just 11 days after the original terror attack.
Since this terrorist attack took place, we've seen it described as Israel's 9/11. Well, for a nation the size of Israel, it was like 15 9/11s. The scale may be different, but I'm sure those horrors have tapped into some kind of primal feeling in Israel, just like it did and felt in the United States. Shock, pain, rage, an all-consuming rage. I understand, and many Americans understand. You can't look at what has happened here to your mothers, your fathers, your grandparents, sons, daughters, children, even babies, and not scream out for justice. Justice must be done. But I caution this: while you feel that rage, don't be consumed by it. After 9/11, we were enraged in the United States. While we sought justice and got justice, we also made mistakes. I'm the first U.S. president to visit Israel in time of war. I've made wartime decisions. I know the choices are never clear or easy for the leadership. There's always cost.
Wow. 9 minutes after 11 is the time. So have we reached the point that Joe Biden warned about in the middle of October of last year, just under a fortnight after the October the 7th terror attack? But Joe Biden almost there, seeing the writing on the wall. And Max in Cambridge, I think, expressing a fairly persuasive case for arguing, yeah, Israel has done that. Israel has managed to turn the reaction into a bigger historical moment, and arguably a bigger historical atrocity than the attack which spawned the response. I mean, who would argue with that analysis in the context of 9/11? Who would say, don't be ridiculous, what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere in the Middle East is nowhere near as serious or as significant or as important as what happened in New York and elsewhere in America on 9/11? What would that be? You know, who would possibly even begin to challenge that analysis? I don't think anybody would. So how would you challenge it in the context of what's happened since October the 7th? Has Israel done a George W. Bush and essentially turned the response into a bigger historical atrocity than the atrocity that spawned the response? Hit the numbers now. You will get through. 0345 6060 973. My inbox is hotting up again, which is nice. This is unsigned. Remember the hostages, James. We began by talking about the hostages because a government minister has said that the deal to release 33 Israeli hostages in exchange for a pause in the killing in Gaza, an Israeli minister, an Israeli government minister, has described that deal as terrible and suggested that it would throw the sacrifices of Israeli soldiers so far in the trash. And he has claimed that it would, well, I'll tell you exactly what he said. The deal is horrible and terrible. A government that throws everything in the trash in order to return 22 or 33 people has no right to exist. So, I mean, very much there, the settlement minister, Orit Strouk, remembering the hostages and violently dismissing any plan designed to release them, even as other supporters of Israel continue to claim that the desire to see the hostages released is what justifies the continuing carnage in Gaza. And you know, the more we talk about it today, the more I feel the clouds clearing on the motivations and the positions of the young people that we've been talking about. That idea that if you were just watching this, so you watched October the 7th, you thought that's absolutely awful. Maybe I'll try and find out what the history is here, what has happened here. What is the grievance of these murderers, for example? You say, right, okay, so that's the grievance, and why did that happen, and what's the history? And now you're watching what Israel is doing in Gaza, and if you are, I don't know, if you're thinking clearly and objectively, it looks like 9/11 now. And as someone who not only recognises the importance of Israel, but if you're someone who needs Israel, if Israel is the place that you go when it starts again, when the persecutions start again, when the pogroms start again, if Israel is that place in your heart, in your mind, how today are you processing the possibility that what Netanyahu has done is 9/11's second act, the massive overreaction to the detriment of the entire world? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. Jack's in Welshpool. Jack, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello, mate.
I do agree that that the 7th of October attacks were on the same level as 9/11 as the 9/11 attacks. It was a complete and utterly horrible and disgusting act from Hamas. However, I will agree with the fact that I think that Israel's response to this can be the equivalent of the Americans' response to 9/11 of the invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq. And it's different. I've got an analogy, and it's difficult because it involves Nazi Germany. Can you bear with me?
Well, can you think of a better one or a different one or a slightly? Because I mean, we've literally just remembered the Holocaust. We've literally just defined Israel's role as the place to which Jewish people go in their hearts and their heads when the persecution starts again. So I'm sure that you can think of an analogy that doesn't actually have to compare the Israeli government to the Nazis. I'm sure you can.
I'm trying not to.
All
it's
right.
just very hard to do so when you look at the coalition government in Israel, 3 members of that coalition government, the 3 member parties, are far-right parties that have ideologies
that is
such
actually
as
true. Yes,
ultra-Zionism and anti-Muslims, and I'm disgusted by the fact that America and Britain support that government. Like, I support Israel,
yes,
but I don't support the government. It's the same as I support Palestine, but I don't support Hamas.
It's not difficult, is it? It's not difficult.
It's not difficult, and that's how my generation look at it. Is that we support the people, we just don't support the people that are supposedly representing the people.
And that's when all the worst stuff happens in history. The problem we also have is not knowing how many people do support the people that we don't support. Netanyahu's coalition is so complicated and so dedicated to political survival that it's almost impossible to get any idea of what the proper mandate looks like. You can make your analogy because, freedom of speech is important. But I do reserve the right to tick you off afterwards, or even halfway through.
I agree.
Go on then.
My analogy mainly is that the Nazis' Kristallnacht.
Yes.
That was a grossly over-the-top response to a Jewish man killing a German diplomat in France. That was over the top. Again, they were doing it for the reasons of trying to push the Jews out,
and to demonise and to make everybody of a certain ethnicity or responsible for the actions of a tiny minority. And I think Gaza does look like that through the eyes of some of the ministers that you've just referred to. They don't believe in the concept of an innocent Palestinian.
Yeah, and that's why I was very. I completely understand that trying to bring a Nazi Germany in this discussion is very difficult and very. I feel wrong. I feel dirty for bringing it up.
Well, we could have stuck with 9/11. That's a pretty powerful analogy, but you've given us another layer of analogy, which in the very tight specifics of what happened that night, probably at least stays within the confines of logic. Whether it's appropriate or not is for other people to reflect upon. Jack, thank you, mate. 11:17 is the time. 11:19 is the time. Mystery Hour on the way, which is, I often say, I think we're all in need of a bit of light relief, but some days more than others, eh? Speaking of which, would you like to hear two comments that both came in at 11:17 to the programme today? Here's the first. The amount of, as a supporter of Israel, how do you feel about ... questions you've done in the last 4 months has been so sad to hear. It's time to call out the government and all its supporters. That one is unsigned. This one is not. This is from Matthew Millett. And he has heard, that person has heard people, or me, going in far too soft on the government of Israel. Matthew Millett has heard, and I quote, pig-ignorant Jew hatred. Well done, James. Adding, are there any fringe cranks with whom James will not nod along? To which the answer is yes, mate. You. Hassan is in Boreham Wood. Hassan, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I think the response that Israel has taken exceeds the response to 9/11.
Oh, come on.
And the reason being is Afghanistan wasn't occupied by the US. Gaza and the West Bank are.
Right.
And so you've got an
occupied by Israel.
Yeah, by Israel.
Yes.
Right. You've got
just for people not across all of the facts, that is a political and a geopolitical matter of fact, an international law matter of fact.
Yes. So you've got an occupied people that are in Gaza, and you've got a militant group, terrorist group that have carried out an atrocity. The people of Gaza have, since 2005, have no agency there in terms of changing anything. And now they've been bombed into oblivion. And just that text that you read out before the Jack's call, I think, yes. It was about bring the hostages home. When in history has anyone ever tried to get hostages out by bombing the place where they're at into oblivion? It's when you see what's gone on in the last 6 months. And I'll be honest, me and my wife, we sit at home in the evenings after putting our children to sleep, and we'll scroll through Instagram reels, tears in our eyes, thinking that these children that are dying look like my children, and the reason that it's being allowed to happen is because they look like my children. That's the conclusion we draw. That whether the government in this country.
Well, the children in Ukraine look like my children, and that's being allowed to happen as well.
It's not silence from
our
government.
Right. You're right, but equally,
our government
hasn't weighed in against Russia any more than it's weighed in against. Well, it's not. That doesn't really work as a comparison, except on skin tone. So I'll withdraw that comment.
So when we look at what's happening, when we look at arms are still being sold to Israel to bomb children that look like mine, and I've got tears in my eyes thinking my 5 and 6 year olds are just. Is this how the world looks at my kids?
Yeah.
Is this literally, children with no agency are being bombed in refugee camps? and by an occupying force, and we're selling arms to them.
I thought you were out of your tree when you came on and said that it's worse than 9/11, but under this analysis, it's kind of hard to argue with you.
Yeah, I live in Boreham Wood, and right in front of the train station. Not on October 8th, not on October 9th. Well into after about 5,000 Palestinians had been killed.
Yeah,
you got a massive flag up of Israel. And I look at that every day, and I think that is in support of the reaction. That's not, for the hostages.
Well, it was originally for it was
not in the middle of October. It wasn't. It would be early days of October. And if you are in support of the hostages, then you've got to want to stop the bombing, because you're bombing the place where they are. And the reason that you're supporting the bombing, is because the kids that are dying look like my kids. And that breaks my heart. And it makes me feel like maybe this isn't the country that I need to live in anymore. If my government and the leader of the opposition can't call that out, then maybe this isn't the place for my family. I was born here. My kids were born here. My wife was born here. Yes, my parents were immigrated in the 60s. But maybe this isn't the place for us.
Can I say anything to reassure you?
I'm not sure I can, because until the government changes policy or the policy makers make a stand, I don't feel like I'm welcome.
Because the government is
in
lockstep with and the Labour Party has not put much distance between itself and the government position, and you see that.
For me to raise my children when kids that look like my kids are not thought about.
And yet, I could take a Jewish caller, and I will, when we're discussing a different subject, who will talk about some of the rhetoric and banners that have been seen on the pro-Palestinian marches. Let me finish. And they will say, is this a place where I can raise my children?
And I would say, look at what the government policies are. Yeah. Are the government policies supporting their position or defending the children that look like my children? So it's the
political landscape.
That's why we march. I take my kids to the marches. They're 5 and 6. I take them. Every time there's a march, we take them. And we take them because there's children that look like them that are dying every day, that are being pulled out of the rubble. And this, from the political classes, this silence, a deafening silence that makes us feel that we're not worth saving.
I'm so sorry that you feel like that.
I've got, my voice is breaking a bit.
I know it is.
Over the last few months, we have been trying to figure out, do we need to emigrate? Do we need to go to the Middle East? Do we go to Dubai?
Forgive me for patronising you, okay? Promise?
Yeah.
But why not derive support from the people marching around you when you're marching for peace and seeing that they come from... and you're going to say because of the government, right? There's all roads.
No, I'm going to say look at absolutely. Look, called hate marches, shut them down. There's been too many. But then
there's people pushing back against that, and they're your neighbours and your friends as well.
And our policy's changing, James. Has anyone spoken of changing? Let's have an arms embargo. Has anyone in senior position?
Well, the SNP. Have you? I'm not making light of your pain, Hassan, but you can. I mean, Scotland's not as far away as Dubai. That's got to be an easier hop, hasn't it? I'm joking around, obviously, with a very serious matter. But the answer to your question is yes. Stephen Flynn in the House of Commons this week said some of the things that you need to hear.
Then there needs to be more of it. Yeah. They need tell me the difference in when those children are being massacred that look like my kids. Is the only reason that the policies are not changing? Is it because they look like my kids? Is that it? Is that when Putin goes into Ukraine, and I'm not across the geopolitics of that area, and I can happily, easily, without knowing everything, say, yeah, that was wrong. That was bad.
Sure.
And I can have empathy for the suffering that the Ukrainians are having. And I don't need to be across it. I'm like, that's awful.
Yeah.
And I don't need to care what color the skin is of the kids in Ukraine. I don't need to know what their religion is. I don't need to know anything. I know it's wrong. And that can't be afforded to the kids in Palestine. Is that because of the color of their skin or the God that they pray to?
Yeah, and to stress again, you're talking mostly about a governmental level rather than
a government
than a
and
civilian,
the opposition,
rather than
and
a political party level rather than civilians. I'll read you something as a response, not as a pushback, but it came while you were talking from John T, who's in St John's Wood, describes himself, by the way, he writes, as an anti-Zionist Jew. And he says there is no equivalence between Israel's reaction to October the 7th and America's response to 9/11. Firstly, because al-Qaeda never represented an existential threat to the US. Hamas's threat to Israel is far greater, especially as it operates on its border. And second, Israel is attacking the perpetrators of the October the 7th crime. America invaded Iraq, a country that had nothing whatsoever to do with 9/11. There's some points there.
There are some points, and I would say that Israel is attacking an occupied land that it occupies, that it has cut off.
So you could both be right in a way, albeit that it's led you both to different conclusions. Al-Qaeda did not represent an existential threat to the US, but equally, America was not an occupying power in Iraq or indeed in Afghanistan.
Yeah. Okay, I can take that, but they didn't. You can say that Al Qaeda and the taking out of the Twin Towers, and U.S. embassies all over the Middle East. That you could argue that was an existential threat. I don't know.
No, I don't either. But it's important to recognise that we are trying to make radio that looks for light rather than ever more darkness and violence. Are you all right, mate?
I honestly, James, I see that flag every day.
Yeah.
Every day, and it makes me feel that maybe this isn't the place for us.
Okay.
And I've lived abroad. I've lived in the US for 5 years. I've lived in Bahrain for 5 years, and this always felt home. This is like, you've been out. You've gone and experienced different things, but it's time to go home. This was home. This is the only home I've known. I always felt like a foreigner, whether it's in Bahrain or whether it's in the
British.
But London's my home.
Okay, I can't.
And it doesn't feel like it anymore.
I'm so sorry to hear that, and I wish I could say something that helped, but I can't. I'm just glad I've given you the opportunity to say that so powerfully.
I appreciate that.
You take care, yeah?
Thank you.
All right. Speaking of America, before the headlines, very quickly from Martin, who's in Connecticut. James, how can you even voice the words that 9/11 was worse than Gaza and, in brackets, the West Bank? I think I was asking a question, Martin, but I will take my medicine. I worked at the World Trade Center until 2000. I was in New York that day. Few, if any, children were blown apart that sunny Tuesday, and 10 times as many people have been killed in Gaza, and many thousands more over the years as Israel purposely, quotes, Martin's quote, mows the lawn. I love you and your show, James, but how dare you mouth the false equivalency that 9/11 was worse? We can cosset ourselves that it was, but that would be a racist and white supremacist belief. I'm a Welsh, white, wealthy man. You also share my fondness for alliterations, Martin. I noticed. I am a white, Welsh, wealthy man. And the wrongness of your equivalency should be obvious to any sane person. I think that came in before Hassan. Set us all straight, perhaps, or maybe not all. It's 11:32. Thomas Watts has your headlines. It is 11:35, and it's a very, what's the word I'm looking for? Do you think? It's a very interesting question, but interesting is far too banal a word to convey what I'm trying to describe. It's a very haunting question. Actually, that's the word I'd go for. I think that's the adjective. And it was a question raised by Max in Cambridge earlier this morning, an 18-year-old student, talking about the repercussions, if you like, of a generational shift in attitudes to Israel as a consequence of what has happened since October the 7th. And he suggested that the reactions to the original atrocity bear comparison with the reactions to the 9/11 atrocity in America. And I think everybody would agree that history has judged the reaction to have been immensely worse than the original atrocity. And I think with that text I read out from John T, notwithstanding, the very, very broad consensus today is that is absolutely right, that they have indeed managed to effect a response that in the eyes of many observers, and today we're talking about young people, outweighs the original offence in terms of death, trauma, misery, destruction, but also in terms of impact, historical impact. 11:37 is the time, and that is such a powerful thought. And Hassan, I hope you're still listening, because you touched a hell of a lot of people who are proud to call you a fellow countryman, and who are, as in some cases, as heartbroken as you. Hi James, your caller summarised perfectly how I and many other Muslims feel. I'm 29 years old, born and brought up in the UK. I've never felt more than I do now that I don't belong here. How can I justify to myself and my future family living in a country where major political parties have unequivocally shown that they would support the ongoing annihilation of people that look like me? Every protest I go to warms my heart, but how long will that last for? 11:38 is the time. Samantha is in Barnet. Samantha, what would you like to say?
Hi, I was just going to bring it back to the comparison with 9/11 from a different perspective, and talk about basically the rise in Islamophobia, obviously after that, in comparison to how what's happening with kind of anti-Semitism now after 7/11, and compare it to that.
Yes.
So you're talking about what's happening in the American universities. And I think the media and journalists have a really big responsibility to draw a big distinction between the Israeli government and innocent Israeli civilians.
Yes.
So obviously Israel's lost a lot of support. And if you take it from the Israeli government's point of view, obviously that's deserved. What is not being portrayed, which should be, is the majority of Israelis, any liberal Israeli, would be against what's happening. And that's really not being put out there. Forget even Jewish people, but Israelis as well. No one would support, any humanitarian would never support what's happening. But the problem with what's happening in places like America, widespread, is now it's gone from, these peaceful protests, which are totally understandable, I've got nothing against them, to now just random innocent Jewish people being affected for a number of reasons.
Yes.
So it's just being used
which is a parallel. I think there's a poignant irony, isn't there, in the comparison you draw between all Muslims being held responsible for the actions of Al-Qaeda, and all Jews being held responsible for the actions of Benjamin Netanyahu or the Israeli government.
Exactly.
Are we?
I just want to draw back to one of your previous callers, Mohammed, who not only said a completely disgusting thing that his daughter, who had lots of Jewish friends, who sounds like, before October 11, how most, British people were completely immersed. I've never experienced any anti-Semitism, or, I grew up with 75% Muslims where I was, and I'm Jewish, completely, interspersed. And then, she's innocently had that view, and then to have her father say, you should stay away from Jews, and not only make that statement, but then to laugh. I mean, and then I've got to admit, your response, great, you understood it wasn't the right thing to say, but for you to be so flippant and say that's baffling or stupid, I can't remember what you said, rather than that's disturbing. Because to me,
I did use the word disturbing. But I'm not here to defend the semantics. I thought it was bloody outrageous. I thought it was bloody outrageous what he said. But I've been doing this job for long enough to know that sometimes you can't take people to the bank for something that came out in what can be quite a frenetic and highly emotional mode. People on the other end of the phone are often a lot more nervous than I am.
I could never. I'm speaking from a Jewish perspective, and I could never ever say anything.
I wouldn't let my children go and hang out with Muslims. You couldn't say that, but I wonder whether after 9/11, some other people might not you, but some other people might have done. I think we're finding common ground, but you're quite right. Yeah. And whether Mohammed is sitting there shaking his head and rueing the moment that he said that, or whether he's baffled as to why you are so disgusted and I am so disturbed, I do not know, and we will never know. But the thing I wanted to pick you up on before you started picking me up on stuff was that claim about liberal Israelis or liberal Jews. I mean, the support, for example, for not sending aid into Gaza is heartbreakingly high in Israel, according to the polling that I've seen. And that sounds pretty barbaric, doesn't it?
No, definitely. I mean, what's happening out there, it horrifies me and disturbs me, and another thing...
No, but I'm questioning your claim to speak for a majority. Two-thirds of the Jewish public...
Netanyahu out even before the 7/11.
Yeah, but that's you. That's wanting to get rid of Netanyahu doesn't mean, for example, that you agree in principle to an independent and demilitarized Palestinian state, and 63% of the Jewish public do not support Israel agreeing to that. So I'm not. So you're absolutely right to say don't conflate all Jews with supporters of what's going on in Gaza. But equally, you can't really claim that the massive majority of people in Israel are as disturbed by what's going on in Gaza as everybody else is.
At the same time, you can't. Whatever the stats are, yes. You must distinguish the difference between, for example, the people that died in 7/11 and the people now being provoked and attacked in America. They're not Israeli government, so it doesn't matter what the political views are.
That point stands. I was just picking you up on the point about liberal support or liberal opposition to what is going on. If you're wearing a yarmulke, or if you are visibly Jewish, and you are receiving abuse on these campuses as a consequence of that, it is obviously obscene. Not least because, as you remind us, you could be the most Jewish person on campus and passionately opposed to both Benjamin Netanyahu's government, the genocidal outbursts of his security minister that we covered earlier, and the continuing carnage in Gaza. All of those things.
I mean, whatever your political views are as well, the protests are supposed to be anti-Israel, not anti-Jew.
Not anti-Jew. Yeah, no, I hear you. Are we cool?
Yeah, all good.
Thank you, Samantha. 11:44 is the time. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the conversation continues until 12. There is a documentary on BBC Three tonight that draws attention back to the West Bank. I think it might also be called The Other War, and looks at allegations of war crimes against security forces there. It's a different legal framework from what's going on in Gaza, because Gaza will be governed by the rules of war, the international rules of war. The occupation in the West Bank, where I think there's about 500,000 illegal settlers in illegal settlements, is very different and is policed by Israel. That's another reason why it falls under the technical term of occupation. And that the rules are much more stringent. You can do things in a war under the terms of the Geneva Convention or international law or whatever treaty it might be that you cannot do in a non-war scenario. So I heard an interview with the director of that film earlier today, and I heard a UN rapporteur as well, whose role is to speak on the possibility of war crimes being committed, and that looks absolutely fascinating. I think it's called The Other War. If it's not called The Other War, I will tell you after this what it is called. It is 11:49. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I always like when patronising people turn out to be the ignorant ones. Solra's been in touch. He writes, "Dear John O'Brien and your producers, war is horrible. However, for those listeners with little historical knowledge, Britain and the USA bombed parts of Germany to pieces towards the end of the Second World War. The Allies flattened many harbours, towns and neighbourhoods in Norway for strategic purposes, which the population had to take on the chin. That is what is happening with Gaza now, as the Israelis know that Hamas and their infrastructure must be defeated for them to live in peace with security, sadly." Well, for texters with little historical knowledge, it is in part due to the actions of the Allies during the Second World War that we now have international treaties governing war crimes and Geneva Conventions and the like, Solran. I'd like to say, but at least you got my name right. But of course, you didn't. Nonetheless, thanks for getting in touch. 10 to 12 is the time. Yusuf is in Leicester. Yusuf, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Yeah, the thing is, look, I think previously with 9/11 and the Iraq War, as it were, I think it was a pretext to carry out an agenda, even though it was static. I mean, categorically stated that it was found out there's no weapons of mass destruction. We couldn't be attacked in 45 minutes, as was first told, and we had this bogus dossier to try and prove beyond doubt, as it were, that there is weapons. So all these things were used as a pretext to carry out,
something that was wanted to be done before 9/11 had even taken place.
Yes, exactly. So the thing is, under where we are right now, I think because of the increase in social media, and we can see firsthand, sometimes live as it is happening, what's happening in Gaza.
Yes.
And previously we only had WikiLeaks to determine or to show us what happened previously. But now we've got social media, which WikiLeaks is almost, we don't need WikiLeaks anymore, basically, in the sense that we can see it firsthand. So obviously that's going to create emotion, it's going to create furor, it's going to create, anger, and a suspicion of what the real motive is. Because, I mean, the things that the rhetorics and the narratives that have been used by the Israeli government, it constitutes, you could say, genocide, the genocidal statements that have been made.
Members of the Israeli government, I think the comment about the Amalekites and the need to get rid of them by the Justice Minister or the Security Minister, it clearly fits into that category, but not the entire government, members of government. I don't know if I'm splitting hairs, but it's such a big word that we have to be kind of careful. And we've got the quote from, sorry, you carry on. I've got something else to say, but I'll wait till you've finished.
Yeah, no, I appreciate what you're saying. I'm not saying we tie everybody with one brush, but my point is, when certain ministers make, if
one of them called for a nuclear bomb to be dropped on Gaza. So if that isn't a genocidal statement, then what is,
Yeah, exactly. No, I agree with you 100%. But at the same time, just another quick side discussion is that, look, I think journalists should be able to question without restrictions any of the people in power, as it were, should come on, be it from in the UK or Israelis, without threat of losing their jobs.
Yeah, so do I.
All right, so and I think they shouldn't have any restrictions. There should be no censorship.
There isn't.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I believe, and I don't. I think she should be. Her interview is fantastic.
Unfortunately, I like every other presenter on LBC, I stand and fall by my listening hours, by my ratings. And when my contract comes up for renewal, the first thing that management will look at is my listening figures.
Yeah, that may be the case, but I'm just saying that the journalists
and
should not have any
And you just listened to 2 hours of very, very robust criticism of Israel. Nobody has ever lost their job on this radio station for their coverage of the Israeli-Gaza conflict, no matter how much stuff you've read on the internet, Yusuf.
Yeah, no, that may be the case. But anyway,
no, mate. No. That is the case. That is categorically the case. So internet conspiracy theories are almost impossible to get ahead of, but I just want you to rest assured that my job is safe until my listening figures come down, regardless of how I cover this issue.
Yeah, that's great. No, that's I
and speaking of silence, there's only one person who's silent in this conversation. It's not you and it's not me.
Yeah, no, it's good to clarify points, which is
happy to. But equally, I completely respect any former colleague's right to say nothing about the situation in which they find themselves, even as all sorts of nonsense and lies move into the public space and cause enormous upset and difficulties for the people who are being accused of all manner of things, from the top of this company down. None of the things that you're reading on the internet have happened.
No, that's great. No, like I said, I think that should be clarified from the top so that everybody
doesn't need to be, because we all know what's happened. We're respecting the silence of a former colleague who's chosen not to set the record straight.
No, that's fine. I appreciate that. But back to the topic. I mean, I don't know if I've got time, but I mean, I think what has happened since the 7th of October is absolutely appalling. Even the other day, a 2-month-old baby who wasn't even alive at the time of the 7th of October attacks, he's been killed as well. So like this, every day we're listening to.
And the parallel with 9/11, I think, is probably impossible to resist from the position that you describe. Certainly, judging by my inbox, it is. That's just a matter of record, a matter of history. Daniel's in Bedford. Daniel, what would you like to say?
James, it was really difficult to listen to Hassan, actually, because...
It was a horrible call, wasn't it?
Honestly, and I probably would have called. I would just listen to your program and then go on with my day merrily, but everything he said resonates with me so vividly. I was sitting with my wife last night, like Hassan, going through videos, seeing little children decimated. Sorry, it's really hard to speak on this matter.
Take your time.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you look at those children and you do think to yourself that if their names were perhaps maybe James or Chris or David, and they were in maybe Scandinavia or Western Europe, then the reaction would be far more of outrage. We wouldn't see the leader of our country almost silent on their killings. You wouldn't see the leader of the Labour Party almost endorsing the fact that they're being starved on a daily basis. And it makes me think that, really, is there a place for me in this country?
This is why the phrase, and I hope you'll forgive me for having taken a bit of time to fully understand why, but this is why the phrase white supremacism appears in the conversation so often. Yeah,
and I mean, we've had serious conversations about perhaps Scotland, like you mentioned with the SNP. At least they seem to have the moral courage to call out a spade for a spade, right? But even then, they're not independent, and they're governed by...
What we've talked about today, perhaps without realising, is people like me, the younger generation of people like me, waking up to what the older generation of people like you have understood for quite a long time. That there are fundamental imbalances now in plain sight that no context can destroy.
Yeah, and I think it's far worse than 9/11. I really do. I mean, having lived through that,
not in statistical terms, but in moral terms, or
yes, the morality. I mean, look now. How do we, as a Western people and as modern Western civilization, where we feel like our moral values are superior to other people in the world, how do we now then justify criticism of these evil totalitarian regimes that exist across the world? How do we then turn around and say that, no, you guys are bang out of order, be it in Russia, be it in China, wherever, Iran? How do we turn around and say that when our governments are willy-nilly sitting there justifying obliteration of children on a daily basis?
Yes, the complete obliteration of children on a daily basis. And this is another dimension of the generational impact that we started the programme talking about, didn't we? The idea that something permanent has shifted in the tectonic plates of coverage of this issue. And that's to everybody's detriment, really. But you prioritise the children who are currently being killed over anybody else, which is, I think, the natural thing to do. It is coming up to 11:59. Mystery hour is around the corner, which I occasionally suggest is often a welcome relief from the main conversation. But should we squeeze in one more call? Let's squeeze in Khalid, who's in Enfield. You've only got a minute, Khalid, so make it good.
Make it good. Okay. Hi, Jarmed. From growing up, I'm a 51-year-old British Muslim. I read about the Crusades and wondered why I was on the losing side as a Muslim, and it didn't quite make sense. I watched 9/11 happen and a lot of Muslim bashing, and growing up in that period of Paki bashing during the 80s, 70s and 80s.
Yeah, obviously let that word pass because you've used it to describe as someone...
My apologies.
Yes, that's okay. That's okay.
And now I'm looking at the destruction of Palestine. I'm looking at poor brown people in the global south who are under the cosh of Western liberalism. And
listen, this isn't... I hear you, and it's the parallel with 9/11 that you're talking about, but there are loads of Jewish people living in this country at the moment who feel more frightened and more persecuted than they ever have done before. So
I know, and I can't quite believe that.
I know, nor can I, but somewhere in between those two positions, the future has to be found. It is coming up to 12 noon. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. As a famous solver of mysteries, we now turn our attention to Mystery Hour, which offers you your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction ordinarily not available anywhere on your radio dial. So if you have a mystery that needs solving, a conundrum that needs unravelling, a riddle that needs riddling, then the number you need is 0345 6060 973. And of course, there are prizes, or at least one prize, to be had for my favourite contribution of the week. But let the seriousness leave the building and let the silliness begin. It's 12 noon on a Thursday and Mystery Hour is upon us.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Mystery Hour with James O'Brien.
4 minutes after 12 is the time, and Mystery Hour is upon us, your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere else on the radio dial, although at least one caller in the last hour tried to extend that invitation into other parts of the programme, which is not necessarily to be encouraged. One of the reasons why Mystery Hour exists is because on days of election, whether local or national, Ofcom regulations prevent us from saying anything that might in any way do anything. So it's just a complete coincidence that it proved so popular when we invented it, that it's still here many years later, and long may that continue. In fact, it's even spawned a board game, which you can win if you are adjudged by me, and me exclusively, to be the finest contributor of the day. So knock yourself out. You can find the full terms and conditions for the competition element of this hour at lbc.co.uk. And on we go. Should we just kick straight in, do you think? Should we just start straight off the top? Luke's in Lim. Luke, question or answer?
Hi, James. Good afternoon. It's a question, please.
I got distracted by the crescendo then, did you? I don't know why. It felt different from usual. I thought it was the 59 crescendo and that we were going to get to the end of that and then go to the news. But here we are. Thank God you're here, Luke. How embarrassing it would be if you weren't. What's the question?
So it's about turmeric. So basically, I'm an early years chef. And on Monday, I cooked a batch of turmeric rice. And after service, I was cleaning down. When I sprayed some degreaser into the sink, it hit the rice and turned it immediately from bright yellow to bright red. So I was just wondering if someone out there knows the sort of, there must be a chemical reaction happening or something, but it just puzzled me, that's all.
So the disinfectant turned the turmeric from bright yellow to bright red, and we want to know what's going on chemically.
Yes, please.
I quite like that question. What did you say you're an early years chef?
Yes, that's right. So from 0 to 5.
Oh, how lovely. And introducing them to interesting flavours like turmeric rice as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're on. I don't know. So, let me get the colours correct. Bright red. So from yellow to bright red. Someone will know the answer to that. And it was just a normal disinfectant, not an organic one or anything like that.
No, just a normal one.
Right, what happened there? 6 minutes after 12 is the time. Ben's in Cleethorpes. Yeah, very helpfully, my young colleague has put a pronunciation guide for Cleethorpes on the board today, which is, how else could you pronounce? How else would you pronounce Cleethorpes?
No, I'm not sure at all. So.
Well, I did. My dad did pronounce Morecambe Morricambe when we were growing up, so maybe there's something there. Question or answer, Ben?
Yeah, it's a question, James.
Carry on.
So my question is, so you see hay lorries coming down the motorway. So I was stuck behind one the other day, and I thought, how much hay would they actually lose over a journey, and would the farmer be compensated for that loss? Because if they're travelling a long distance, I mean, I was stuck behind it, and there was a lot of hay hitting my windscreen. I thought, over a long distance, this must be a significant amount. So I just wondered if anyone knew how much they would lose.
How are they going to get compensated?
Well, I'm not sure, but is there like saying,
how much hay does a hay lorry lose when a hay lorry goes up the road?
Yeah, that's essentially
This is one of the daftest questions we've ever had on the programme.
Really?
Well, look, I mean, A, I don't think hay is very expensive.
No,
B, if you don't, I mean, if it was expensive, they would cover it up in a way that meant that it didn't fly off. And B, you'd have to weigh the entire cargo at both ends of the journey in order to have an accurate idea of how much hay you had lost.
Yeah, I guess this essentially turned into what is a bale of hay, but that's not the question. It's
all right. I'll put it. So I get a farmer to explain all the things I've just said in a rural accent, and then you'll be happy, right?
Yeah, that's it.
There you go, you're on.
James.
All right, any farmers out there who can tell us why hay bales are transported in a way that necessitates or at least involves the loss of some hay? 0345 6060973. Oh, and now it's happening. Yeah, OK. Now, you like the question. Darren's been in touch. Say, I love this question, James. I've always wondered the same thing. If it drove for long enough, would all the hay eventually disappear? To which I think the answer is no. It's the flicky bits on the outside that are going to fly off, isn't it? The solid mass of hay, I think, is probably going to be safe. And another one now, Patrick's here saying, leave him alone. It's an amazing question. And then the punsters. Someone will bail him out. Right, another Patrick, and he's clutching at straws if he thinks he's getting an answer to this one, says Kevin. We shall see. Mystery Hour never ceases to take us by surprise. It's 9 minutes after 12. Harvey's in Solihull. Harvey, question or answer?
It's a question, please, James.
Go on.
So I've been watching a program called Shogun recently. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's based in Japan, kind of in the 1600s or so. And there's words in there like shogun and taiko.
How old are you?
I'm 25.
Yeah, see, I watched it the first time round.
Oh, in the 80s, yeah.
How dare you laugh at me, Harvey? It's not funny to have been alive and watching television in the 1980s. It doesn't make me some sort of figure of fun. I also read the book. Have you read the book?
I've not.
You see? Yeah. James Clavell, I think, if memory serves, wrote the book. Anyway, sorry, on with the question.
So the words shogun and taiko and stuff are obviously Japanese words that would have been written, when they were, I don't know how language works, when they were made in Japanese script. When they're translated into English on the subtitles, for instance, they have accents over the O and over the I, over the O in shogun and over the I in taiko. And I'm wondering where those accents came from, because we don't have accents in English.
No, but we know what they mean. But we know what they mean.
But what do they mean?
Well, they're pronunciation guides, aren't they? So we do have some accents in English. Not.
We don't have those accents. We don't have the kind of straight line over the O or over the I.
No, but it's telling you how to pronounce the O and the I.
But we don't have those with any other words, though.
Because we don't need them.
But why do we need them with?
Because Japanese, because the inflection on Japanese syllables changes the meaning of the word. So if you get the inflection wrong, you'll be getting the word wrong. Whereas I could call you, I could say Solihull or Solihull, and everyone would know that it was the same place, right? In fact, as a resident of Solihull, you will know that people do call it both Solihull and Solihull.
They do, yeah.
But imagine if there were two places. One called Solihull and one called Solihull, but both spelt in exactly the same way. Then we would need accents.
Is there two words for shogun then? My point is, when it's translated into English, if you're told this is how it's pronounced, it's pronounced shogun. Why do you need the accent?
I can't believe the confidence with which I just embarked upon that explanation, Harvey. When the truth is, I have absolutely no idea at all.
It was convincing.
Yeah, it was convincing, and I think it's with a fairly good chance of being true. But yeah, it is. It is something that just came straight out the top of my head. So why do we have when a Japanese word is translated into English? Why do we have what appear to be accents on words that are in a language that doesn't have accents in it? Usually, that's the question, right?
Translated from Japanese script, which obviously isn't the same as ours, to an English.
So it says shogun on the screen, and there's an accent over the O.
I think it's over the O, yeah.
Or over some, yeah, okay. Well, why? I think that question's pretty self-explanatory. I suspect my answer is correct, but quite often when I say that, I turn out to be wrong. Joe's in Maidstone. Joe, question or answer?
I've got a question for you.
Carry on.
If you was born blind, could you ever experience dizziness and get dizzy?
Yeah, definitely. It's got more to do with your ears than your eyes, dizziness.
Yeah, it's just whenever I get dizzy, I find if I sit there with my eyes closed for a little while, it calms it all down. Like, I'm about literally dizzy, spinning, as opposed to like travel sickness.
Yeah, no, I know, but it's not really the fact that your eyes are closed that's helping you deal with the dizziness. It's the fact that you've sat down and sat still.
Oh, okay.
Closing the eyes helps you concentrate more. I mean, we could test it now. You could close your eyes and start spinning around and then tell me whether you feel dizzy or not. Do you fancy it?
Not at the minute. Not in the middle of the story. I'm giving strange looks.
I'm going to leave it on the board. There's a curiosity about blindness that a lot of people have. I was interviewing a fellow from the Royal National Institute of the Blind the other day about what sighted people can do in terms of being more helpful and more welcoming. And I suppose one of the short answers to that is to ask and answer questions where there is confusion. But I'm pretty sure from other reasons that have nothing to do with blindness that dizziness is more about the inner ear than it is about any other organ. But we'll wait for someone to tell us the answer to that. Austin is in Beck, and by ear I don't mean hearing. Okay, I'm not a biologist. Austin's in Beckenham. Austin, question or answer?
A question, please, James.
Carry on.
Stones on railway tracks,
either
side, all the way through the actual rails, thousands upon thousands of stones. Maybe it's a daft question, but I'm just curious. The reason, is it an aerodynamic thing?
It's not going to be aerodynamic, is it?
Well,
because they stay still.
True, yeah, but it must make it smoother. The underneath, I guess, the train that makes it go smoother with the stones beneath. What's the reasoning?
Why do railway tracks have
thousands upon thousands of stones?
Why are they surrounded with stones? I can't believe we've never done that before. I don't think we have.
Yeah, I was just travelling yesterday on the tram locally, and I just looked
in between
down,
the sleepers. We're talking mostly, aren't we? In between the sleepers.
Yes, yeah, just and either side as well. That there are, maybe 2 or 3 yards towards, say, the perimeter. There are stones lined there. I guess they could be sort of to replace damaged stones. I don't know. Maybe.
We should find out. Why do you need the stones on the railways, or the tram, the rails? 0345 606 0973 is the number you need. It's 12:15.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James Obrien.
It's 12:17. You're listening to James Obrien on LBC. Stones on tracks. Blind and partially sighted people getting dizzy. Accents on English words when they're translated from Japanese characters. Hay loss when transporting bales. And why did Luke's turmeric rice go bright red when he sprayed some detergent in its direction? What a mystery. What a selection of mysteries. I've had a couple of complaints. Some people think the questions are rubbish this week. I can take no responsibility for that. Occasionally some people seem to think I make all the decisions around here. But I can take no responsibility whatsoever for the questions that get put through to the studio. I disagree with the analysis. I don't think they're particularly... I thought the hay one was a bit weird, but then, of course, as soon as I said I thought it was poor, loads of you got in touch to tell me that you thought it was brilliant. But as Keith has just pointed out, we are almost certainly now going to be besieged by what we could politely or affectionately describe as train nerds. Enthusiasts, thank you, Keith. So we shall get that question answered pretty quickly in order to keep our phone lines free for all the other stuff that we're doing. Diane is in Bordeaux. Diane, what would you like to... Question or answer?
Answer, please.
Carry on.
It's the answer to the stones on the tracks. It's ballast, it's drainage. Stops the tracks from flooding.
Yeah. But how is it ballast?
Simple. Well, the stones, it's the drainage. So when the water goes on it drains down and away from the tracks.
So okay, got it. So it spreads it around and it means that the bits below the tracks aren't going to get soggy and muddy.
That's it. It's quite simple, really.
Oh, okay. Well, crikey. Qualifications?
I'm an ex-London Underground tube driver.
That'll do nicely. Round of applause.
Thank you very much.
And did you relocate to Bordeaux? Are you in retirement, holiday, different career change?
No, if only. But I'm retired. I cruise the Canal de Midi and I live not far from Bordeaux, so...
Good Lord, living the dream.
It's the best of both lives.
Yeah, isn't it? From trains to boats, 20 minutes after 12 is the time. Diane, thank you. Russ is in Bangor in Northern Ireland. Russ, question or answer?
Question, James. Good morning.
Hello. Carry on.
Wife's a baker, with the avid one. She's never been on a bake-off, but other than that... Quick question, though. Cakes and biscuits, when cakes go off, they go hard. When biscuits go off, they go soft. Yeah. They've got the same stuff in them.
Have they, though?
They have. I've asked her. I checked with her before I phoned. I wasn't going to make this call without checking with the wife first.
Right. Because that's how you actually get the legal definition of a cake and a biscuit, because I think at one point they had different VAT assignations. I don't know whether they still do or not. And that is, I think that is actually how you distinguish between a cake and a biscuit. But they can't have the same qualifications, ingredients.
Qualifications, yeah. Biscuits have A levels and cakes have GCSEs.
They can't have the same.
I've read your books. You're a clever guy.
Cakes are. Maybe it is. Maybe it just becomes soft when it's big. So what's the question actually in exact language?
In basic terms, the exact language, when a cake gets stale, it goes hard, and when a biscuit goes stale, it goes soft.
Yeah, that's not a question.
It is a question. Why?
Now it's a question.
You're getting revenge on me, aren't you?
I absolutely am getting revenge on you. So why? Given that we believe, because Russ's wife has assured us, and indeed I've baked both cakes and biscuits. I can't off the top of my head say with absolute
flour
certainty.
And butter or fat.
Yeah. What about eggs?
I think, there might be. Yeah.
There'd be eggs in a cake usually, but not in a biscuit. You see, so that might be part of the. I don't know.
It could be the eggs.
Could be all about the eggs.
You're right.
I think it's all about the eggs.
Then the biscuit or the cake?
No, you can't.
Be the question.
I think it's going to be eggs. I really do. In which case, the question will turn out not to be as exciting as I originally thought. Helen's in Lancaster. Thank you, Russ. Helen, question or answer?
Answer.
Carry on.
Turmeric is a natural dye, and a lot of natural dyes respond to acids and alkalis like indicators. So, example would be litmus, which comes from lichens, I think. And it so happens that turmeric goes red in the presence of alkalis and doesn't change in the presence of acids.
Oh, but you see, that's a chicken and egg question, oddly, isn't it?
Go on.
Well, he wants to know why it goes red.
Well, that's probably really complicated.
Well, exactly.
Because it's the nature of the colouring, which is, I don't actually know which colour is in turmeric, but, it'll be something really complicated, some big organic compound, which has some...
But actually, in a way, you've answered the question. It's because of the alkaline in the detergent.
Yeah, in the alkali in the detergent.
Sorry.
Yeah, alkaline is an adjective.
All right. Flipping out. Every day's a school day, isn't it?
It is.
So let me try that again. It's because of the alkaline detergent.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay. Qualifications?
I was a chemistry teacher.
Yeah, that'll do. Give a proper round of applause for Helen, please. Chris is in Gainsborough. Chris, question or answer?
It's a question, please.
Carry on.
Long-time listener, first-time caller, a little bit nervous.
It's only me.
I know. I've been going through the Mystery Hour archives and listening to, the Mystery Hour podcast and listening to lots of questions.
Yes.
There's one from 2015, which never got an answer, and so I'm bringing it back.
Okay. Are you sure? You've listened to all of them, searching for the answer to that question?
Well, I'm up to about 2016. I listen to it all the time in my car.
Go on,
if terminal velocity is around 122 miles per hour, how come an avalanche will drop at over 200 miles an hour? Now, this came up, as I say, 2015. I think it was about September 2015, and Professor Howell came on and said it was physically impossible for an avalanche to drop at that speed. So I then Googled the speed of an avalanche, and it was over 200 miles per hour, so there was never an answer given.
So that's what we want to know?
Yeah. How does it travel at over 200 miles per hour if terminal velocity is only 120-ish?
Do you know why we never got an answer to that question?
No one knew.
Because I don't understand the question even, never mind the rest of it. But I shall put it on the board for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And thank you for reminding people that the Mystery Hour archive is available everywhere. Absolutely everywhere, particularly at Global Player. Rebecca is in Seaton Sluice. Rebecca, question or answer?
It's a question, James, but I do need to apologise. You mentioned earlier someone phoned in too early, and that was me.
Was it? That's all right. It's allowed. People get very excited on.
Corrected.
People get very excited on Thursdays.
Oh yeah, it's nearly Friday. That's why.
Go on. Question.
It is this. Why is it called? Why do we have England, Ireland, and Scotland, all with land in.
Yes.
And then we have Wales. Why don't we have Whale land?
The land of the Welsh.
Yes.
Wales, England, Scotland, Ireland.
Why is it England all have land in, but Wales doesn't?
Okay. Yeah, I quite like that question. I mean, there's lots of places that don't have land in, but not in the United Kingdom. In the United Kingdom, there's 3 lands and a Wales.
Yes.
All right, you're on.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you know the answer to that question, the number you need is 0345 606 0973. We've got that question from Chris about avalanches and terminal. Do you understand that question? Really? So that nothing is supposed to be able to go faster than that, but an avalanche apparently does. Okay. Eddie's in Epsom. Eddie, question or answer?
Answer, James.
Carry on.
So in regards to Japanese, so you're quite right. The marks above characters determine how that particular phoneme is pronounced.
Fantastic.
In Japanese, it's obviously hiragana, katakana. Well, it's obvious, but hiragana, katakana, and kanji are what's used.
Yes.
But fundamentally, shogun, so the character above o means it's a long O. And in Japanese, they show that character by using different characters, if that makes sense, to show it's a long sound. So it's trying to make a simple answer to a
no, you've done a lovely job there, but it means that I was correct. This is the most important element of this exchange, is that I was absolutely right, even as Harvey laughed at me for being old.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. And it's the same with, of course, many languages. Japanese is just a bit harder for us, of course.
Qualifications?
I've been studying Japanese for 30 years, like you. I used Duolingo to keep up.
Did you? Crikey. I slipped up this week. I forgot yesterday. It's because I ride a bike to work now, so I can't do my Duolingo on the public transport. So all of these things, Eddie, are sent to try.
I do it only in Japanese as well. So that's a showing off.
Round of applause for Eddie. Thank you. Look at that. 12:58 is the time. Kevin's in 5. Kevin, question or answer?
Hi, James. I have a question, please.
Carry on. I didn't say, hang on, before you start, I didn't say Ireland was part of the UK. I said Northern Ireland was part of the UK. The last thing I need is to have some sort of Irish flare-up going on. I usually upset the Scots when we manage to talk about Scottish politics. Northern Ireland is in the United Kingdom. On that we can all agree. Back to Scotland. Back to Kevin. Carry on.
Okay, thank you. So my question is, right, so when you've got wind and snow, it can last all day. A couple of days, it'll just be non-stop. Why, when it's hailstones, does it only last 5-10 minutes and no longer than that?
Well, I mean,
you don't get hailstones all day.
Occam's razor would tell us that the meteorological conditions in which hailstones can be created are vanishingly rare and very, very quick.
Oh, is that right?
I don't know.
And what does that mean in layman's terms?
What I just said. I mean, the hail needs a very specific set of circumstances in which to appear, and rain and snow don't. Like think of it as the space between two brackets. And for hail, it's tiny, and for rain and snow, it's huge, and for snow, it's somewhere in between the two. So it will change. The meteorological conditions required for hail will change very quickly, and they will no longer meet the requirements for the production of hail.
There we go. I've learned something new today.
Well, I don't know that I can take a round of applause for that, but I can't think that there's any other explanation. Can you?
Well, no. I think you've explained it pretty well.
Well, I haven't explained it, have I? I've speculated on it. So I shall leave it on the board. Rain, snow and hail is the shorthand for Kevin's question. And how come 2 of them last forever and 1 of them only ever lasts for a couple of minutes? The time is approaching 12:30 and Amelia Cox is here with your headlines.
Mystery Hour with James Obrien. This is LBC.
Oh, well, this will be fun. 33 minutes after 12 is the day. The phones have gone south. So I have absolutely no way of presenting a radio phone-in programme while the phones... I mean, I'm still on the radio, so we can do the radio bit of the radio phone-in programme. But the phone-in element of the radio phone-in programme is currently kaput because the phones aren't working. Do we know what's happened to the phones? No, we don't. Those famous words, those immortal words. Engineering are looking into it. Well done, engineer. And here he is. So, I mean, listen, you can tell by my tone that I'm currently quite ebullient and upbeat, and I can riff a little about the difficult situation in which I find myself, which is, of course, unlike any other situation, because if this were not Mystery Hour, then I could return to the story that we were discussing. I could provide a little more detail about whatever the topic under discussion was. I could even, of course, offer up my opinion, again, on the subject that was under discussion while waiting for the phones to reignite. And, of course, technically during Mystery Hour, as Keith reminds me, I'm not supposed to read text. I think we can have a bit of a moratorium on that rule for at least the next 26 minutes. Oh, don't say 26 minutes out loud, because then it could be... we're going to use FaceTime audio. God, they're good. Well played. Look at that. Crack team of operatives galloping to the rescue while engineering is on the case. So, yeah, all the texts are working. Don't worry about that. WhatsApp's working. What about WhatsApp? It's all good. But we're going to use FaceTime audio now. Jonathan is in Blenheim. Jonathan, question or answer?
I've got an answer.
Carry on. You see, such good quality audio FaceTime, isn't it? We should use it more. Carry on, Jonathan.
No problem. Yes, it's the avalanche question, how it can go faster than its terminal velocity.
Oh, crikey.
Now, I'm not an expert in this, but I know a bit about engineering. I'm an engineer. I know a bit about aerodynamics and stuff like that, so I started to think about it. I think I could answer this, so I was like, okay, think about it. And it occurred to me that, well, terminal velocity is really determined by air resistance. So if you're falling in space, your terminal velocity is like as fast as you want.
Yeah.
Now, in an avalanche, the only snow that is experiencing air resistance to any degree is on the outside. All the snow on the inside is going to be pushing faster against the outside snow. And that's why when you see footage of an avalanche, it seems to be puffing over and forwarding from in itself. And then that inside snow comes to the outside, it gets slowed down, and it gets pushed by more snow. That's falling down the mountain as well.
I think that works, doesn't it? Qualifications?
Well, I said I'm an engineer.
No, I know you've said it already, but the rubric of the feature demands that I ask you again towards the end in order to play you a round of applause.
Of course.
So your engineering studies have given you the insights that you needed to answer this question.
Yeah, that's a nice way of putting it.
Round of applause for Jonathan, please.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much. You saved my bacon. Are the phones back? Well, we don't know. So, this is going to be great. Owen's been in touch. He says, does this mean you will finally have to read out one of my texts? Absolutely not, Owen. What a ridiculous suggestion. Martin's in Epping, I think. Martin?
Hello.
Question or answer? Yes, loud and clear. Epping calling.
Question.
Yes, carry on.
Over. It's air fresheners. How do they neutralise odours?
As in, how do they work?
Yeah, I mean, it says on a spray can, neutralises all odours. How does it work? Is it just masking the smell? Or?
No, it must be doing something else. Otherwise, it would smell like, a downstairs toilet does when you've sprayed loads of air freshener around to try and get rid of an unpleasant odour, but all you end up with is an unpleasant odour dressed in air freshener. Don't you?
You can always burn some toast. That covers up.
Yeah, or light a match. You're not wrong. But that might... Hey, you might have just stumbled into part of the answer there. Because you don't replace the smell. When you light a match, you don't replace the smell of the bad odour with the smell of a recently burnt match. Something different happens from when you spray an air freshener. So the actual deodorizer maybe has a chemical relationship to the match. We shall find out, Martin.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much. Deodorizers and Martin. Glenn is in Basildon, seems to be holding up. Are we happy now with the phones? Do we think the phones are fixed? Do we think they're okay? What do we think the phones are fixed? Glenn, question or answer?
Answer, mate. Wales Land.
Carry on.
Why isn't it called Wales Land? I actually answered this, I think it was last year.
Yeah, I do. I do as well, actually. I just can't get the staff, Glenn.
So, as I said then, the word land doesn't necessarily denote a kingdom as such or a settlement. It's just a word that the Anglo-Saxons sometimes applied, and it just so happens. I mean, the word Wales originally comes from the English word Walha, which is foreigner.
Yeah.
And they applied it to all the native Britons.
Oh, so it's a question of who named the territory.
Yeah, and the English named, as they pushed the Welsh back into sort of the areas of Wales and Cornwall, they described them as Walha, which is kind of a really sort of quite an offensive term, really, because they were describing them as the foreigners. So they pushed the Welsh out, and they applied a Latin style of IA at the end. They called it Wallia. And they did the same with France. They called it Francia. They didn't call it Franceland,
Oh,
for
of course.
example.
Yeah.
So, and same as Denmark. It was a Denemark, which means the Danish border. So they didn't apply, land all the time. Whereas you think about sort of regions within England anyway, you've got Snodland, Cumberland, these are part of England, but they still got the word land in them. So you don't necessarily need the word land to denote a country.
Qualifications?
I speak and translate Old English.
How many rounds of applause is that now?
I have no idea, mate.
You've done well, though, haven't you? You'd be in the pantheon. You'd be in the all-time greats, I think.
Yeah,
in the Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame.
I'm competing with my Basildon Wayne, aren't I? That's why.
Yeah, well, this is true. I don't. Yeah, the Basildon boys. Round of applause for Glenn.
Thank you, buddy.
Thank you. And I like this from Richard, who probably wasn't paying attention. You say, you did that avalanches and terminal velocity question 8 years ago. Now, you thought that the person who asked that question was something of a mystery. It was Chris, wasn't it? Something of a mystery hour enthusiast. But he literally said that he had listened to it at the time and listened to the whole episode and listened to subsequent episodes, and the question was never actually answered correctly. So that was 2015. So unless it was answered in 2016, it was actually 9 years ago, Richard, as opposed to 8. But I love that. I mean, crikey, I forgot what we did on the show 10 minutes ago. Never mind having recall of things. That's the beauty of podcasts. And of course, you can rewind, can't you, and pause and all that kind of thing. Mark's in Inverness. Mark, question or answer?
It's an answer, James.
Carry on.
Right, it's to do with the biscuits and the cakes.
Yes.
So with biscuits, they're always generally flat and thin, generally contain flour, sugar, butter, sometimes a bit of water, and depending on the recipe, may or may not have egg. And then a cake has pretty much those same ingredients, but nearly always has eggs, and they're a lot thicker, fatter.
Yes.
So with a biscuit, you bake out the moisture.
You bake out the moisture.
And with a cake, you actually don't bake out the moisture. The moisture evaporates, hence why cake goes hard, and a biscuit will absorb moisture because it's essentially very, very dry, and it just absorbs moisture from the atmosphere.
What is the name of the process by which the biscuit absorbs moisture from the atmosphere?
Oh, God. Oh, now you're asking. I would just say that's a...
Would it... Could it be osmosis?
What was that?
Could it be?
I'm not sure. Okay. I don't know.
That is... So how long have you been listening to the show, roughly?
Oh, about 9 months now.
Yeah, you see, I can tell you're a newbie because 100 years ago, whenever that word that I just said to describe that possible reaction that you just described appeared on the radio, the Hallelujah chorus would follow. But we haven't done.
I do know the word, but I acquired that word with something different to reverse osmosis with water for aquatics.
Yeah, that's the thing as well. But between you and me, when I used to try to answer all the questions, whenever it was a science question, eventually I would end up saying that word. And in order to stop me from doing it, we introduced a feature like a sort of form of alarm, But on this occasion, I think it was
you
actually...
You got the word out quicker.
I think it was correct. What are your qualifications?
I used to work for a very large blue-chip confectionery company that made twin-fingered biscuits.
That'll do nicely. Round of applause for Mark, please.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It probably isn't osmosis, but I've done it now. And the chorus does not distinguish between correct and incorrect usages of the word. But that's one for the purists. That's one for the old school. That's one for the diehards. That's one for the 2015 listeners when that kind of thing happened all the time. Ben's in Newark. Ben, question or answer?
Answer, please, James.
Carry on, Ben.
It's the answer to the hay/straw question.
Carry on.
I've not really fully worked it out because it depends on whether the question was asked whether it's hay or straw, because it depends on what the caller really wanted to know.
Well, it was a fairly daft question between you and me.
Yeah.
The idea that you'd get compensation, but
yeah.
Let me think what question you're best placed to answer then. It's Why are they comfortable with that amount of loss of hay?
To be quite honest, it's a difficult one to answer, and it's a probably daft answer because the set weight of the bale is determined by the farmer who baled it. I've got a degree in agriculture, and I've worked on farms for last 10 years. I'm only 29. Anyway.
But if you wanted to stop it shedding, you cover it in tarpaulin. But it's going to be more of a cost in terms of exertion and time to cover it in tarpaulin than you would make back from hanging onto the hay.
Yeah, and it is actually worth a considerable amount of money. If you put it into perspective, this year it's just reached £220 a tonne.
Has it?
And you can get about 40 tonne on a lorry. So there's some money's worth running around the country when you see them.
But you're never going to lose. What about this one, Ben?
Go on then.
If a lorry loaded with hay bales embarked upon an infinite journey, would it eventually have no hay bales at all?
I mean, you probably would be somewhere near, yes. Yeah, it would probably take a good few million miles, I suspect.
Yes, but eventually, especially if it was quite bumpy, so the baled hay was getting jigged, I think is the technical term, jiggled.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. I'll go with that. Yeah. So sorry, it's not a good answer, but
it's
it
a
is
brilliant
a sort of
answer. Brilliant qualifications, agricultural degree, 10 years on a farm.
Yes. Keep up the good work.
Well, you too. Look at that. Welcome aboard. 12:45.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien.
12:48 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Everyone who we just hung up on can ring back now. I got told to... Well, not everyone. What? Well, oh, sorry. I thought you should get them to ring back again. Oh, we're just sorry for hanging... Well, I'm not sorry for hanging up on them. That's the price you pay for ringing a popular radio show. What do you think this is? Some sort of gold medal accent? If my colleagues hung up on you, they are sorry. Okay? They're not really. They're not actually, are they, at all? They just think that's good manners somehow demands that you... They're not sorry for hanging up on you at all. They've already forgotten your name. Anyway, we've still got a few questions that need answers. Darren's in Plymouth. Darren, question or answer?
It's an answer.
Carry on, Darren.
It's an answer for the snow, wind and hail. So I'm going to focus mostly on the hail part of this.
Okay.
Hail comes from convective, unstable cloud. So as you see clouds, think of them mostly as basically snow. They're frozen water.
Yes.
And as it comes down through the cloud, it either remains snow or turns rain where it melts. In a convective cloud, there are like updrafts. So the snow will come down, melt a little bit, have almost like rain on the outside of snow, and then go back up again, refreeze, and repeat until it becomes too heavy to hold.
Refreeze.
Refreezes, yeah.
Yes.
So it will be basically a snowflake, comes down to be a snowflake with water on the outside, go back up again, and that will freeze, come down, melts, goes up, freeze.
Oh,
and then the cloud becomes not buoyant enough to hold that up.
Yes.
So when that hail then falls, it can then fall as hail, or it might defrost again, become rain. But then if it falls as hail, it can either fall as soft hail, which has got snowflakes still inside, or hard hail, which is purely water.
So specifically, why do hailstorms take such a small amount of time?
Because they can only happen in unstable air. This process has to go over and over and over again. All the other processes can happen in air, which is hot air hitting cold air, and just condenses out.
So I was right, wasn't I?
Yes, more or less.
What are your qualifications?
I'm a meteorologist in the Royal Navy.
Well, of course you are. Yeah, I don't have any, obviously, so I was just speculating. But using Occam's razor, it had to be that the circumstances in which it could happen were much rarer than the circumstances in which the things that happen more could happen.
Yeah, it's called the Bergeron process.
What a one?
The Bergeron process is what it's called.
Yeah, of course it is the Bergeron process. Round of applause for Darren, please. Thank you, Darren. What's it going to be like this afternoon?
Depends where you're going to be. Where I am, it's looking pretty bad down on the south coast because you've got that warm front over us, which is really, really moist air. It's warm, but it's cloudy and it's foggy.
We should get some biscuits. We should get loads of biscuits down there to absorb all the moist air, and then. Oh, anyway, I'm trying to knit together topics that were never destined really to be knitted together. Lovely stuff, Darren. Take care. Sharon's in High Wycombe. Sharon, question or answer?
Oh, well, it's a correction.
Oh, of course it is.
So, James, love your programme, but you are a very naughty boy.
I know. What
because you've given the wrong definition of osmosis.
Yeah, because...
what is the definition of osmosis?
It's all about the semi-permeable membrane, miss.
No. You never say semi-permeable.
Permeable.
It's
partially permeable.
Membrane.
It's all about the partially permeable membrane, miss.
Okay, well done. And because kids get this, people get this process wrong a lot. It's only the movement of water.
Yeah.
It's hard enough it is without
the movement of water across a membrane, through a membrane.
Partially permeable membrane.
And whereas what I described was just the big biscuit getting soggy. So the molecular structure within the biscuit has not changed at all.
Well, it might have done, I don't know, but there's no membrane. Membranes would have been broken up.
So the absorption of water, there's a word for that, hydroscopy. Is it?
Yes.
You don't know, miss.
I do.
You can tell what I was like at school, can't you, Sharon? That's a hydroscopic process, I believe, miss, when the water is simply absorbed from the atmosphere into...
You are probably right. I'd have to go home and discuss it with my husband.
Qualifications?
Is what I usually said. Sorry?
Qualifications?
Retired biology teacher.
How did I tell? Remarkable. Something. What a moment.
So can you make sure you're only talking about osmosis with the movement of water and not just any...
Yes, better late than never, Keith. Well done.
Okay.
Yes,
thank you very much.
No, thank you. You can have a round of applause as well, because Keith's clearly a bit trigger happy. Thank you, Sharon, or Miss. Dean's in is it Synodon? Syndon. Dean, anyway. Question or answer?
Good morning to you, James.
Hello.
Can I first come out with the cliche of a long-time listener, first-time caller?
Of course you can, yes.
I love your show.
Oh, you're very kind.
It's Finden.
Finden.
Yes, with a
bloody S on it. So the people that gave me a pronunciation guide for Cleethorpes have called Finden, which I've heard of, and therefore would have pronounced correctly, Sinden, with an S, which I've never heard of, and therefore wondered whether perhaps it had an esoteric pronunciation. But we digress, or digress.
We do indeed. It's a question, please, James.
Carry on, Dean.
The screw.
Yes.
Is the reason why the thread, to drive it into something that you have to turn it clockwise, is there a reason behind that?
Well, it's the thread, isn't it, mate?
Well, I know it's the thread. Is there a reason why it's...
Yeah, but if you threaded it the other way round, it would be lefty-tighty, righty-loosey.
But surely a thread...
It's a natural... You thread it because most of us are right-handed.
You think it's a right-handed, left-handed thing?
Of course it is. Think about it. You do. What's easier to do? To turn it that way? Well, it actually doesn't make much difference, really, no. No, it does. You've got a lot more purchase turning it to the right than you have. It's a lot easier to screw stuff in than it is to screw it out again.
You think? Sometimes when a screw is kind of rusted in, you kind of need that purchase to undo it.
Yeah, I know you do, but that's a 1 in a million screwdriver moments, isn't it?
You're suggesting you put more screws in than take out?
Yes, obviously. Obviously.
Okay.
Come on.
Okay.
Qualifications?
I don't know what your qualifications are.
I was waiting for you to ask me.
What are your qualifications?
Carpenter.
Is there a biblical thing?
DIY, man. Got big toolbox. Big toolbox, dude.
Mrs. O'Brien.
Yeah, I do my bit around the house these days. I tell you what I'm doing this weekend. I'm putting together a bin hut. That's not the thing that it was called in the catalogue. A big bin thing. A big bin thing. But it is. I put the question on the board, but I'm pretty sure that it is for the reasons that I describe. It's hygroscopic, I think, not hydroscopic, but nonetheless. Thank you, Dean. I don't know why we're taking a question at 12:56. Well, I do. It's because our phones went south and all the answers that we had lined up got hung up on, and because we didn't apologise correctly or in a sincere fashion, they've come back again. They haven't come back again. So I can't even remember what's been answered and what hasn't. But I know that Ross is in bonus and he's got a question or an answer.
Yeah, Boness.
Boness. I said Boness. What the hell is happening today? But I said Boness, Ross.
said bonus.
I did say bonus. No, I did say... Do you know what? I was going to style it out, but then I remembered that on Global Player, you can rewind and pause live radio, so that had have been blown out. Go on then. Answer, please.
Answer is the odour spray question.
Yes.
So I think it would be down to something called enzymes or an enzyme cleaner. So basically they speed up anything organic can smell, and they speed up decomposition, so they just make it die faster, make the smell complete. You know, if you have food in a bin and you just leave it and you forget to take it out, eventually it just stops smelling. I have discovered it goes very furry, but it stops smelling. So it's essentially that it speeds it up and stops it smelling.
Love it. Qualifications?
A car detailer. I work with cars and clean them and polish them.
Yeah, but how do you know the stuff about odours, though?
Because when you clean the interiors, there's sometimes very sticky, smelly things that live in cars. There has been used underwear and many things.
I see what you mean. Oh, okay. No, and it does it's all about the enzymes, isn't it?
Yeah, but vomit and other things like that, that never goes away. Never goes away in a car. But
hang on a minute, Sheila. I'm sorry.
I know.
You didn't expect.
I'm not
that.
good with
getting,
vomit.
Getting ready to do a grown-up radio program, and there's Ross in Bowness. Chucking up
milk is another one.
What's the worst thing you've ever found in a car that's... Don't. It's a family programme, but I'm flying by the seat of my pants already today, so go on.
It's
that, is it? No, okay. No, thank you very much. Thank you very much, and good night. Well, Ross in Bowness, well played. Round of applause. I was right about the screw. Jack in Southam is on the line to tell me that, but it's too late now. It's all about muscles. I'm going to give the board game to the fella that answered it was Richard who answered the avalanche question, not because it was necessarily my favourite contributor. Jonathan who answered it, because he took it from the archives. He's answered a question that was from 8 years ago. So it nearly went to Chris for being the archive searcher, but it's going to Jonathan for being the archive answerer. There we go. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, the official LBC app, where you can also pause and rewind live radio. Download it now for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty. 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 Time for Sheila Fogarty.